Hi, guys. This is for our fourth week of book club with the Julian chapter, starting on page 52. And we are going to read through page 71. And the first chapter is Out of School. Dad didn't say anything when he met us in the lobby. We just walked out the doors without saying goodbye, even to the security guard at the reception desk. It was weird leaving the school when everyone was still inside. I wondered what Miles and Henry would think when I didn't come back to class. I hated that I was going to miss PE that afternoon. My parents were quiet the whole way back to the house. We live on the Upper West Side, which is about a half-hour drive from Beecher Prep, but it felt like it took forever to get home. I can't believe I got suspended, I said, just as we pulled into the parking garage in our building. It's not your fault, honey, answered Mom. They have it in for us. Melissa, Dad yelled, which surprised Mom a bit. Yes, of course it's his fault. The whole situation is fault. Julian, what the heck were you thinking writing notes like that? He was goaded into writing them, answered Mom. We had pulled to a stop inside the garage. The parking garage attendant was waiting for us to get out of the car, but we didn't get out. Dad turned around and looked at me. I'm not saying I think the school handled this right. 2 weeks suspension is ridiculous. But Julian, you should know better. I know, I said. It was a mistake, Dad. We all make mistakes, said Mom. Dad turned back around. He looked at Mom. Jansen's right, Melissa. If you keep trying to justify his actions, that's not what I'm doing, Jules. Dad didn't answer right away. Then he said, I told Jansen that we're pulling Julian out of Beecher Prep next year. Mom was literally speechless. It took a second for what he said to hit me. You what? I said. Jules, Mom said slowly, I told Jansen that we'll finish out this year at Beecher Prep, Dad continued calmly. But next year, Julian's going to a different school. I can't believe this, I cried. I love Beecher Prep, Dad. I have friends. Mom. I'm not sending you back to that school, Julian, Dad said firmly. No way am I spending another dime on that school. There are plenty of other great private schools in New York City. Mom, I said. Mom wiped her hand across her face. She shook her head. Don't you think we should have talked about this first? She said to Dad. You don't agree? He countered. She rubbed her forehead with her fingers. No, I do agree, she said, softly nodding. Mom, I screamed. She turned around in her seat. Honey, I think Daddy's right. I can't believe this, I said, punching the car seat. They have it in for us now, she continued, because we complained about the situation with that boy. But that was your fault, I said through clenched teeth. I didn't tell you to try and get Augie thrown out of the school. I didn't want you to get Tushman fired. That was you. And I'm sorry about that, sweetheart, she said meekly. Julian, said Dad, your mom did everything she did to try and protect you. It's not her fault you wrote those notes, is it? No, but if she hadn't made such a big stink about everything, I started to say. Julian, do you hear yourself, said Dad. Now you're blaming your mom. Before you were blaming the other boys for writing those notes. I'm starting to wonder if what they were saying is right. Don't you feel any remorse for what you've done? Of course he does, said Mom. Melissa, let him answer for himself, Dad said loudly. No, okay? I yelled. I'm not sorry. I know everybody thinks I should be all, I'm sorry for being mean to Augie. I'm sorry I talked smack about him. I'm sorry I dissed him. But I'm not, so sue me. Before Dad could respond, the garage attendant knocked on the car window. Another car had pulled into the garage, and they needed us to get out. This is called Spring. All right. I didn't tell anyone about the suspension. When Henry texted me a few days later asking why I wasn't in school, I told him I had strep throat. That's what we told everyone. It turns out 2 week suspension isn't so bad. By the way, I spent most of my time at home watching SpongeBob reruns and playing Knights of the Old Republic. I was still supposed to keep up with my schoolwork though, so it's not like I got to totally goof off. Ms. Rubin dropped by the apartment one afternoon with all my locker stuff. my textbooks, my loose leaf book, and all the assignments I would need to make up, and there was a lot. Everything went really well with social studies and English, but I had so much trouble doing the math homework that Mom got me a math tutor. Despite all the time off, I really was excited about going back, or at least I thought I was. The night before my first day back, I had one of my nightmares again, only this time it wasn't me who looked like Augie, it was everyone else. I should have taken that as a premonition. When I got back to school, as soon as I arrived, I could tell something was up. Something was different. The first thing I noticed is that no one was really excited about seeing me again. I mean, people said hello and asked me how I was feeling, but no one was like, dude, I missed you. I would have thought Miles and Henry would be like that, but they weren't. In fact, at lunchtime, they didn't even sit at our usual table. They sat with Amos. So I had to take my tray and find a place to squeeze in at Amos's table, which was kind of humiliating. Then I overheard the three of them talking about hanging out at the playground after school and shooting hoops. But no one asked me to come. The thing that was weirdest of all, though, was that everyone was being really nice to Augie, like ridiculously nice. It was like I had entered the portal to a different dimension, an alternate universe in which Augie and I had changed places. Suddenly he was the popular one, and I was the outsider. Right after last period, I pulled Henry over to talk to him. Yo, dude, why is everyone being so nice to the freak all of a sudden? I asked. Oh, that's painful to read. Oh, said Henry, looking around, kind of nervous. Yeah, well, people don't really call him that anymore. And then he told me all about the stuff that had gone down at the nature retreat. Basically, what had happened was that Augie and Jack got picked on by some seventh grade bullies from another school. Henry, Miles, and Amos had rescued them, got into a fight with the bullies, like real punches flying, and then they all escaped through a corn maze. It sounded really exciting. And as he was telling me, I got mad all over again that Mr. Tushman had made me miss it. Oh man, I said excitedly. I wish I'd been there. I totally would have creamed those jerks. Wait, which jerks? The seventh graders. Really? He looked puzzled, though Henry always looked a little puzzled. Because I don't know, Julian. I kind of think that if you had been there, we might not have rescued them at all. You probably would have been cheering for the seventh graders. I looked at him like he was an idiot. No, I wouldn't, I said. Seriously, he said, giving me a look. No. Okay, he answered, shrugging. Yo, Henry, are you coming? Amos called out from down the hallway. Look, I gotta go, said Henry. Wait, I said. Gotta go. Want to hang out tomorrow after school? Not sure. Text me tonight and we'll see. As I watched him jog away, I had this terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach. Did he really think I was that awful that I would have been rooting for some seventh graders while they beat Augie up? Is that what other people think? That I would have been that much of a dirtwad? Look, I'm the first one to say I don't like Augie Pullman, but I would never want to see him get beat up or anything. I mean, come on, I'm not a psycho. It really annoyed me that that's what people thought about me. I texted Henry later on, yo, by the way, I would never have just stood by and let those creeps beat Augie and Jack up, but he never texted me back. This chapter is Mr. Tushman. That last month in school was awful. It's not like anyone was out and out mean to me, but I felt iced out by Amos and Henry and Miles. I just didn't feel popular anymore. No one really ever laughed at my jokes. No one wanted to hang out with me. I felt like I could disappear from the school and nobody would miss me. Meanwhile, Augie was walking down the hallways like some cool dude, getting high-fived by all the jocks in the upper grades. Whatever. Mr. Tushman called me into his office one day. How's it going, Julian? He asked me. Fine. Did you ever write that apology letter I asked you to write? My dad says I'm leaving the school, so I don't have to write anything, I answered. Oh, he said, nodding. I guess I was hoping you'd want to write it on your own. Why? Everyone thinks I'm this big dirtbag now anyway. What the heck is writing a letter going to accomplish? Julian, look, I know everyone thinks I'm this unfeeling kid who doesn't feel remorse, I said, using air quotes. Julian, said Mr. Tushman, no one Suddenly, I felt like I was about to cry, so I just interrupted him. I'm really late for class and I don't want to get into trouble, so can I please go? Mr. Tushman looked sad. He nodded. Then I left his office without looking back. A few days later, we received an official notice from the school telling us they had withdrawn their invitation to re-enroll in the fall. I didn't think it mattered since Dad had told them we weren't going back anyway, but we still hadn't heard from the other schools I had applied to. And if I didn't get into any of them, we had planned on going back to Beecher Prep, but now that was impossible. Mom and Dad were furious at the school, like crazy mad, mostly because they had already paid the tuition for next year in advance, and the school wasn't planning on returning the money. See, that's the thing with private schools. They can kick you out for any reason. Luckily, a few days later, we did find out that I'd gotten into my first choice school not far from where I lived. I'd have to wear a uniform, but that was okay. Better than having to go to Beecher Prep every day. Needless to say, we skipped the graduation ceremony at the end of the year. Okay, so now we're on to summer vacation. My parents and I went to Paris in June. The original plan was that we would return to New York in July, since I was supposed to go to rock and roll camp with Henry and Miles. But after everything that happened, I didn't want to do that anymore. My parents decided to let me stay with my grandmother for the rest of the summer. Usually I hated staying with Grandmere, but I was okay about it this time. I knew that after my parents went home, I could spend the entire day in my PJs saying, hello. Oh, no, I mean playing Halo. And Grandmere wouldn't care in the least. I could pretty much do whatever I wanted. Grandmere wasn't exactly the typical grandma type. No baking cookies for Grandmere, no knitting sweaters. She was, as Dad always said, something of a character. Even though she was in her 80s, she dressed like a fashion model, super glamorous, lots of makeup and perfume, high heels. She never woke up until 2 in the afternoon, and then she'd take at least 2 hours to get dressed. Once she was up, she would take me out shopping or to a museum or a fancy restaurant. She wasn't into doing kid stuff, if you know what I mean. She'd never sit through a PG movie with me, for instance, so I ended up seeing a lot of movies that were totally age inappropriate. Mom, I knew, would go completely ballistic if she got wind of some of the movies Grandmere took me to see. But Grandmere was French and was always saying my parents were too American anyway. Grandmere also didn't talk to me like I was a little kid. Even when I was younger, she never used baby words or talked to me the way grown-ups usually talk to little kids. She used regular words to describe everything. Like if I would say, je veux faire pipi, I don't know French, guys, meaning I want to make pee-pee, she would say, you need to urinate, go to the lavatory. Oh, sorry about my dog. And she cursed sometimes too. Boy, could she curse. And if I didn't know what a curse word meant, all I had to do was ask her and she would explain it to me in detail. I can't even tell you some of the words she explained to me. Anyway, I was glad to be away from New York City for the whole summer. I was hoping that I would get all those kids out of my head. Augie, Jack, Summer, Henry, Miles, all of them. If I never saw any of those kids again, seriously, I would be the happiest kid in Paris. This chapter is called Mr. Brown. Oh, I'm so sorry about my dog. The only thing I was a little bummed about is that I never got to say goodbye to any of the teachers at Beecher Prep. I really liked some of them. Mr. Brown, my English teacher, was probably my favorite teacher of all time. He had always been really nice to me. I loved writing, and he was really complimentary about it. And I never got to tell him I wasn't coming back to Beecher Prep. At the beginning of the year, Mr. Brown had told all of us, hey, Prince. Shh, shh, shh. At the beginning of the year, Mr. Brown had told all of us that he wanted us to send him one of our own precepts over the summer. So one afternoon while Grandmere was sleeping, I started thinking about sending him a precept from Paris. I went to one of the tourist shops down the block and bought a postcard of a gargoyle, one of those at the top of Notre Dame. Hey, Prince, come here. Come on. The first thing I thought when I saw it was that it reminded me of Augie, and then I thought, oh, why am I still thinking about him? Hi, poops. Um, why do I still see his face wherever I go? I can't wait to start over. And that's when it hit me. My precept. I wrote it down really quickly. Sometimes it's good to start over. There, perfect. I loved it. I got Mr. Brown's address from his teacher page on the Beecher Prep website and dropped it in the mail that same day. But then after I sent it, I realized he wasn't going to understand what it meant. Not really. He didn't have the whole Mwah. He didn't have the whole background story about why I was so happy to be leaving Beecher Prep and starting over somewhere new. So I decided to write him an email to tell him everything that had happened last year. I mean, not everything. Dad had specifically told me not to ever tell anyone at the school about the mean stuff I did to Augie for legal reasons. But I wanted Mr. Brown to know enough so that he would understand my precept. I also wanted him to know that I thought he was a great teacher. Mom had told everyone that I wasn't going back to Beecher Prep because we were unhappy with the academics and the teachers. I felt kind of bad about that because I didn't want Mr. Brown to ever think I was unhappy with him. So anyway, I decided to send Mr. Brown an email. And this is the email. Hi, Mr. Brown. I just sent you my precept in the mail. Sometimes it's good to start over. It's on a postcard of a gargoyle. I wrote this precept because I'm going to a new school in September. I ended up hating Beecher Prep. I didn't like the students, but I did like the teachers. I thought your class was great, so don't take my not going back personally. I don't know if you know the whole long story, but basically, the reason I'm not going back to Beecher Prep is, well, not to name names, but there was one student I really didn't get along with. Actually, it was two students. You can probably guess who they are because one of them punched me in the mouth. Anyway, these kids were not my favorite people in the world. We started writing mean notes to each other. I repeat, each other. It was a two-way street, but I'm the one who got in trouble for it. Just me. It was so unfair. The truth is, Mr. Tushman had it in for me because my mom was trying to get him fired. Anyway, long story short, I got suspended for 2 weeks for writing the notes. No one knows this though. It's a secret, so please don't tell anyone. The school said it had a zero tolerance policy against bullying, but I don't think what I did was bullying. My parents got so mad at the school, they decided to enroll me in a different school next year. So yeah, that's the story. I really wish that student had never come to Beecher Prep. My whole year would have been so much better. I hated having to be in his classes. He gave me nightmares. I would still be going to Beecher Prep if he hadn't been there. It's a bummer. I really liked your class, though. You were a great teacher. I wanted you to know that. Ooh, so that's the end of his email to Mr. Brown. Ooh, Julian does not get it. I thought it was good that I hadn't named names, but I figured he'd know who I was talking about. I really didn't expect to hear back from him, but the very next day when I checked my inbox, there was an email from Mr. Brown. I was so excited. And this is Mr. Brown's email. Hi, Julian. Thanks so much for your email. I'm looking forward to getting the gargoyle postcard. I was sorry to hear that you wouldn't be coming back to Beecher Prep. I always thought you were a great student and a gifted writer. By the way, I love your precept. I agree. Sometimes it's good to start over. A fresh start gives us the chance to reflect on the past, weigh the things we've done, and apply what we've learned from those things to the future. If we don't examine the past, we don't learn from it. As for the kids you didn't like, I do think I know who you're talking about. I'm sorry the year didn't turn out to be a happy one for you, but I hope you take a little time to ask yourself why. Things that happen to us, even the bad stuff, can often teach us a little bit about ourselves. Do you ever wonder why you had such a hard time with these two students? Was it perhaps their friendship that bothered you? Were you troubled by Augie's physical appearance? You mentioned that you started having nightmares. Did you ever consider that maybe you were just a little afraid of Augie, Julian? Sometimes fear can make even the nicest kids say and do things they wouldn't ordinarily say or do. Perhaps you should explore these feelings further. In any case, I wish you the best of luck in your new school, Julian. You're a good kid, a natural leader. Just remember to use your leadership for good, huh? Don't forget, always choose kind. I don't know why, but I was so happy to get that email from Mr. Brown. I knew he would be understanding. I was so tired of everyone thinking I was this demon child, you know? It was obvious that Mr. Brown knew I wasn't. I reread his email like 10 times. I was smiling from ear to ear. So, Grandmere asked me. She had just woken up and was having her breakfast, a croissant and a cafe au lait delivered from downstairs. I haven't seen you this happy all summer long. What is it that you are reading, mon cher? Oh, I forgot. Oh, I got an email from one of my teachers, I answered. Mr. Brown. From your old school? I thought they were all bad, those teachers. I thought it was a good riddance to all of them. Grandmere had a thick French accent that was hard to understand sometimes. What? Good riddance, she repeated. Never mind. I thought the teachers were all stupid. The way she pronounced stupid was funny, like stupide. Not all, not Mr. Brown, I answered. So what did he write to make you so happy? Oh, nothing much. It's just, I thought everyone hated me, but now I know Mr. Brown doesn't. Grandmere looked at me. Why would everyone hate you, Julian? You are such a good boy. I don't know, I answered. Read me the email. No, Grandmere. Read, she commanded, pointing her finger at the screen. So I read Mr. Brown's letter aloud to her. Now Grandmere knew a little bit about what had happened at Beecher Prep, but I don't think she knew the whole story. I mean, I think Mom and Dad told her the version of the story they told everyone else, with maybe a few more details. Grandmere knew there were a couple of kids who had made my life miserable, for instance, but she didn't know the specifics. She knew I'd gotten punched in the mouth, but she didn't know why. If anything, Grandmere probably assumed I had gotten bullied, and that was why I was leaving school. So there were parts of Mr. Brown's email she didn't really understand. What does he mean, Augie's physical appearance? One of the kids that I didn't like, Augie, he had this awful facial deformity, I answered. It was really bad. He looked like a gargoyle. Julian, that is not very nice. Sorry. And this boy, he was not sympathetic, she asked innocently. He was not nice to you? Was he a bully? So I thought about that. No, he wasn't a bully. So why did you not like him? I don't know. He just got on my nerves. What do you mean you don't know? She answered quickly. Your parents told me you were leaving school because of some bullies, no? You got punched in the face, no? Yeah, well, I got punched, but not by the deformed kid, by his friend. Ah, so his friend was the bully. No, not exactly. I can't say they were bullies, Grandmere. I mean, it wasn't like that. We just didn't get along, that's all. We hated each other. It's kind of hard to explain. You kind of had to be there. Here, let me show you what he looked like. Then maybe you'll understand a little better. I mean, not to sound mean, but it was really hard having to look at him every day. He gave me nightmares. I logged onto Facebook and found our class picture and zoomed in on Augie's face so she could see. She put her glasses on to look at it and spent a long time studying his face on the computer screen. I thought she would react the way Mom had reacted when she first saw that picture of Augie, but she didn't. She just nodded to herself and then closed the laptop. Pretty bad, huh? I said to her. She looked at me. Julian, I think maybe your teacher is right. I think you were afraid of this boy. What? No way. I'm not afraid of Augie. I mean, I didn't like him. In fact, I kind of hated him, but not because I was afraid of him. Sometimes we hate the things we are afraid of, she said. I made a face like she was talking crazy. She took my hand. I know what it is like to be afraid, Julian. There was a little boy that I was afraid of when I was a little girl. Let me guess, I bet he looked just like Augie. No, his face was fine. So why were you afraid of him? I asked. I tried to make my voice sound as disinterested as possible, but Grandmere ignored my bad attitude. Go, Grandmere. She just sat back in her chair, her head slightly tilted. I could tell by looking into her eyes that she had gone somewhere far away. Okay, that's it for this week.